Hello, everyone. Welcome to the contributors meeting. I'm Leo. I'm going to be your host today. And starting off with triage and discussion, last week we had Ishita and Justin. Are Ishita or Justin in the call? I don't see them in the call. Maybe Blake, if you mind pinging Justin. I'll just continue with the meeting. Yeah, and next step is selecting who's going to be doing triage for next week. Any volunteers?
Yeah, put me on secondary.
Okay, thank you, Andre. Any volunteers for primary? I can pick it up for next week. And that is done.
Sorry, I have a quick question. So what's expected there? So is it just like getting more information, trying to debug, maybe fix, and just just try to do your best on each issue, maybe target, etc.
Yeah, pretty much. We don't have really a guideline specifically. I worked on something similar and suggested some changes to this process. So this is not official yet. But yeah, pretty much looking at the open issues and open PRs, syncing back to us if something is out of the ordinary. Usually, some of the maintainers will just look at issues that really stand out and have
Mhm.
something critical and then bring up to this meeting.
I see. Sounds good. Should I use help wanted tag if I encounter such like critical issue?
Yeah, you can use the tag.
Okay,
Mhm.
sounds good.
Okay, cool. All right, let's start. And we have a few topics today. Andrea, I didn't pick all your topics. I picked a few of them. If we
Yeah,
have time, we can
that's
go
fair.
over.
I didn't expect to cover it. It's probably gonna take like a few more weeks.
Right.
Yeah, that's all
Cool.
right.
Cool.
I
So,
tried to order them in the priority list for me, and
uh,
also like I picked up some issues filed by Josh Soroff initially, which I found valuable, and I like tried to mix them together. So yeah, let's see how it goes.
all right. Cool. Um, so yeah, I think the first topic is from Michael. Am I right, Michael? I don't see your name here, but I remember you mentioning it.
Yeah, I wanted to add a piece to each contributor meeting to start discussing stuff we want to do in Argo CD 3.0. I'd like to see if we can do a 3.0 in place of what would have been the 2.15 release. And the idea is to make relatively small but still technically breaking changes. So in this part of the meeting, I wanted to give time for folks to propose a change that they plan to actually contribute the code for, a breaking change, and then get any feedback for concerns if there are reasons to believe that maybe more breaking than what is acceptable for a relatively lightweight major release. Anyway, so the first one I wanted to propose is 19768, which is removing support for configuring repositories in the Argo CDCM config map. That was a very, very early way to configure repositories, and it was quickly replaced by the secret system because there's obviously the need to store secret information associated with repositories. It's a lot of code to support something that I think is relatively it's not used very heavily anymore. But if people have use cases that are unique to that feature, or if they're super heavily using this and would find it to be a huge burden to migrate to secret-based repos, I'd want to know that as soon as possible so that we don't do the code for 3.0. Anyway, that's my pitch.
Cool. Thank you, Michael.
Oh
All
yeah,
right.
I will add one more thing. I think it was like talked through for like 3.0. Just switch default login format to JSON for like better integration with like tools like Datadog and probably like OpenTelemetry like based stuff. Because There are various edge cases for like text format for extracting structured tags, and it usually like doesn't work too well. But for JSON, it seems all like predictable.
Yep, I'd be in favor of that change. Do you want to create an issue and add it to the 3.0 milestone?
Yeah, will do.
Yeah, and just as a recap on the 3.0 kind of plans, my hope is that we can make changes only that are very, very unlikely to cause people problems, or in the case that it's likely to cause more people problems, that the opt out is very, very easy. So turning on JSON logs by default would be an example of something that's relatively disruptive, but also super duper easy to revert. So I would think of that as something that's reasonably acceptable for 3.0. Pasha asked if we should do major version updates on a regular basis. I think that we should give 3.0 a whirl and then see how we feel. If we think we were able to make progress that should be replicated annually, then yeah, we should go ahead and fold it into the annual planning. But I don't know. Let's see how it feels after we cut one. And then Blake, would it be worthwhile to have a 3.0 flag so it can be opted into prior to 3.0? So for the example that Andrew gave, you can opt into JSON logging today. I do think there'd be value in creating a section of the upcoming release notes saying, okay, we plan to make these changes. Please go ahead and change your default if you want to get ahead of the game. And I see Ryan, you got your hand up.
Yeah, I think something similar in that vein. So, like for the first issue that you mentioned regarding the repos and how you register them, would you feature flag that or completely delete the code?
For something like the Argo CD CM change, I would like to completely delete the code. I know that Intuit uses that feature, and I want to see how much work it would be for us to transition. I think the population of people using that code is so small that it's okay to just kill it off and tell people, sorry, tough luck, you've got to use secrets now. But it depends on how much noise people make. If folks make a lot of noise, we go ahead and add a flag, and then try to deprecate it in 4.0 or remove it in 4.0.
Got it.
And Harriet?
Unrelated to the 3.0, but could we zoom in a bit, please?
I'm sorry, what's the question?
Could you zoom in, please? The text is quite small.
Oh, okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Is it better?
Yeah, we could even go one more. That's great. Thank you.
All right. Cool. Thank you, Michael. Anything else on this topic? Anyone?
Yeah, for the 3.0, and I think I don't want to make this longer than it has to be. I'll look at the milestones. Are we considering merging the what's it called, the GitOps engine code base into like are we into like the intrigue? Because I know that's been kind of like on that list of things. I think that'd be a good opportunity to merge like the GitOps engine and kind of let it kind of die off after the 3.0 release. I don't know if any thought is put into that. I haven't looked at the milestones.
No plan to tie it to the 3.0 release. I would love to find a forcing function for that change because it's useful for a ton of little stuff, but it's not useful enough for any one big thing for me to sort of plant a flag and make sure that we get time dedicated to do that. If you can think of some reason why this is absolutely necessary, please let me know so I can try to get it done. But wouldn't tie it to 3.0.
I'd love to bring this up in 3.0 actually. I'll try to negotiate time to dedicate on that insight into it. So let's see.
Sorry, can you give a bit more context, guys, on why separate repos like GitOps Engine Argo and some like Argo CD UI were created in the first place? Are there other projects referencing that?
There were in the past. So Alex M did that. So he created this. I think this code was originally inside Argo CD code base, and he extracted and created this separate library. So there were a few companies using it in the past. We discussed this with them already, and the plan is pretty much to bring that code base back inside Argo CD because of the problems that we faced maintaining the external library.
It was originally an effort to share code with Flux, and as it turned out, just the sort of architectural differences were too great to overcome to really share that code. And now we basically have one main consumer, Argo CD. So it's sort of like the package repo in Argo Proj and Argo UI for that matter. There are a bunch of little things that were sort of abstracted out in anticipation of having multiple consumers, and then those multiple consumers never really happened. So now they're just maintenance overhead.
I see.
Okay, anything else for 3.0? Okay, thanks everyone. Moving on, Daniel Moses-san. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly. You want to?
No, you 100% got it. So,
Cool. You want me to click the link? You want to share your screen? Up to you.
no, sure, you can click the link if you want. This is just following up from, I guess, the meeting on November 7th, where we're trying to get around like certificate validation things in cases where the Helm value schema basically is in a different URL than the actual chart itself. I figured this is actually the easier way to do it. Helm already supports this option in 3.16. So I basically put in a PR to do that. I based this off of the skip CRDs flag that Argo already has. And I basically changed everywhere that they changed the code, I changed it here. I've actually never contributed to Argo before, so it could be that I did it wrong or I missed something. I'm also not 100% sure if I need to test this more than the existing test that I updated basically says that the flag is present or that it's not present. But otherwise, I think this is probably right. I didn't even realize, to be honest with you, until the conversation just prior, that maybe I also need to make a change in the Argo UI project, or maybe I don't, and that can come later. I'm not 100% sure. Yeah.
One thing like this that quickly stood out to me is like you are trying to upgrade Helm, and I think there's been PRs to do like that for 3.16, and they had some troubles. So I would just suggest just separating out the change from this PR.
So it requires Helm 3.16 because that flag to Helm template -- skip schema validation, it
Oh.
only exists in 3.16.
Okay, fair enough.
The
Can you maybe reference the PRs, Andrew, in this one, just so Daniel is aware of the problems that were faced before?
Sure.
Because yeah, if we do that in a one big PR, I kind of agree that it's maybe better to have a single PR to just upgrade Helm and deal with the problems that it brings, and then having this additional feature applied in a separate PR, isolated from that upgrade.
So the PR looks really, really good. Good job finding all the sort of nitpicky stuff that you got to do when adding a flag like this. Let's see. I think you're right about the UI. In the past, I think we've added Helm flags and just sort of forgotten to add the UI experience. If you have time to look at adding those flags to the sources UI, great. If not, I wouldn't consider it a blocker for merging, but I do hate kicking that can any further down the road if it's not too much work to just fix it. So that's one piece. The second piece, and I think it would be more of a blocker, would be I'd love to see a test that actually reproduces the issue of a schema URL being like bad or broken. I don't know if the reproduction would require. I think you could probably just have a schema that references a dead URL, right?
Right. So I could definitely do that. The only question I had, and this is, again, I was using the skip CRDs as a template. Do I just throw that in the test repos, the test data, sorry, folder, and then that's it? Or, I mean,
Yes. I
yeah.
think So I think you just want to create a Helm chart in test data. That like if you run Helm template locally, it
Mhm.
fails unless you enable skip schema validation. And then
Sure.
you test run it both ways. I don't know if that's better nested in like a repo server test or in an E to E test. Honestly, look around, see what tests exist already, see if there's something that's kind of similar, and just whatever hits that code path will be fine.
Okay. I will take a look just somewhere in repository slash test data.
Yeah, repository slash test data is one place. There's also test slash E to E that has just a bunch of different stuff. So you could theoretically set up a whole like application that references this Helm chart, and you define the Helm chart in test data. That's
Mhm.
a relatively heavyweight test, but it may be easier to write. Just depends
Okay,
on.
I'll definitely look around. And then are there other things like I think the other checks on the PR haven't run because I guess nobody has given it the go ahead to run. Are we expecting anything else to break there or not really?
I wouldn't. I'd expect it to work. I don't know why checks haven't run because it used to be we had to like manually approve, and I haven't seen that button in a while. Try resolving the conflicts pushing. Maybe that'll convince it to run.
Yeah, so I also put in a commit to resolve the conflicts, but I guess other people are also merging things to main that change the same um, generated file. So I'm happy to do it, but I think a conflict probably will reappear with that file quickly.
Yeah, it's eh, it depends. Sometimes you can go like a week or two, no one will merge anything that conflicts. Sometimes it's an hour. Yeah, just run Cogen local, push it, and hopefully it stays fine for a while.
Okay, I'll give it a shot. Thanks.
Thank you, Daniel. Okay, moving on. Jason. Secrets from file. I may not be able to attend. Is Jason in the call? Okay, doesn't seem so. Let's move this up. And the next one is Guillaume. Guillaume Ducin. Ducin.
Yeah.
Is that you? Yep.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, it's me. Hi, guys. So,
Hello.
yeah, so two items to discuss with you. So the first one, the first one is the Argo CD namespace restriction in a NAP in any namespace context. So in my use case, I'm dealing with a multi-tenant Argo CD instance, and I'm allowing users to only deploy application and application sets in their own namespace. And I don't want them to deploy in Argo CD namespace. And with the UI, currently they can do it because there is no restriction. And even if you put in place restriction at project level or inside the cluster secret level, it's not respected because there are hard code in the code that says, okay, it's Argo CD namespace, it's allowed. So it's bypassing all the settings. And I understand it's because it's for historical reason and backward compatibility, but then there is no way to make it work now. So I'm proposing here in this change to change it to make it work, but I'd like to discuss it with you. So because it's a breaking change. So should I wrap that in the feature flag, or what do we do? What do we think?
So can you point exactly where the breaking change is? What is the?
Well, you can check in the change. It's
Mhm.
everything there.
Okay,
So
where
basically,
is?
there are a couple of places at the end, yeah, util security. There are a couple of places where it says if it's Argo CD namespace, it's okay. And so what I do here is that I'm checking if there is some source namespaces in the project that are listed. Then I expect Argo CD namespace to be in this list as well. And if there is none, then I keep the previous behavior saying, okay, if there is no source namespace defined, Argo CD namespace should be whitelisted.
So I want to zoom back a little bit. Is if I'm reading the issue correctly, what you're saying is that when a user goes to the Argo CD UI and they want to create an application, if absentee namespace is enabled or if it's not enabled, either way, your app is always going to be created in the Argo CD namespace. And that's probably because maybe you don't want users creating applications there. And also, the app might reference a project which is not allowed to use applications in the Argo CD namespace. I'm not sure if that's
Yes.
even a valid configuration.
And even in the, I've put in the cluster secret that the namespace is just the remote namespace, so not Argo CD1. And that check as well is bypassed because Argo CD namespace is whitelisted in the code, directly hard coded.
Okay. Okay, let's set aside those second two concerns real quick, because it sounds like there are potentially three guards that we need that we don't have. And let's start with just the first one. You create an application via the UI, and it's always created in the Argo CD namespace. I want to know.
But this is not true. It depends if you put the prefix or not to put it in the other namespace. So
Okay, so you
maybe-
can't prefix it.
yeah, you can prefix and it goes inside the other namespace. Yeah.
Okay. So to me, I don't think that that's necessarily a security vulnerability, because if your RBAC is crafted correctly, then a user will not be able to create an application in a namespace which they're not allowed to create it in via the UI, because we do include the application namespace in the RBAC check. So I think that's maybe a UX issue, that you have to specify the namespace prefix instead of having like a dedicated field for it in the UI. But that doesn't sound like a security issue to me.
No, this one is fine. I've created another pull request to add the application namespace in the UI, so to define it.
Okay.
I think the UI part is fine. It's more the check itself. So when you create I think in the RBAC it's skipped anyway because it's Argo CD namespace. So the RBAC check.
So
Except if you define the real role in Kubernetes to say Argo CD can't create application and application sets in its own namespace. Otherwise, at Argo CD level, there is no check about that. It's bypassed anyway.
So the way the RBAC works is you have applications, comma, create, comma, and then you have the application specifier. Now, the application specifier can contain 3 \delimited parts or 2 \delimited parts. If the specifier contains 3 parts, then that means it contains, I believe it's project/namespace/application. So if the user specified the namespace in the UI when they created it, then that is the format that the RBAC check is going to construct in the application server code, the 3-part format. If they choose not to specify their application, then the API server is going to construct the 2-part format. Either way, whichever format gets constructed for the check by the API, it will be validated against the user's RBAC rules. So if the user has defined applications, comma, create, comma, my project / my namespace / star, that will allow the user to create an application in that specific namespace and that specific project, and the application can have any name. In other words, if the administrator correctly constructs their RBAC, then they can appropriately restrict which namespaces the user is allowed to create their application in. I could be wrong about the implementation, but that's my understanding of the implementation.
Yeah, it's something I have not tested, but I think you are right. Yeah, it could
Yeah,
work
it
like
sounds I think that sounds like what it kind of should be. Yeah, I think like for this separate permission for create, which should be checked, and I think like, for example, in like my company use case, I don't think we even allow create from UI at all, and I think default role would be just read only. So if there is no permission specified, then it's just read only. So I think like create should be denied. But yeah, like it's probably good to test it.
Yep. So I'm reasonably confident in that implementation. Do give it a test. If I'm wrong, then we should obviously fix it. That would be a pretty significant security issue. So the second issue we should look at is the validation that when you create an application, you specify project my project. You specify namespace, say team A, and if namespace team A is not permitted in the project called my project, the UI, what I think you're saying is the UI will not block the user's creation of that application, even though the moment it's created, it's already invalid. Is that correct?
Yeah, but it's not only the UI, it's the API server as well. So yeah, it's if only if the namespace is the Argo CD namespace, basically. If it's another namespace, the check is done correctly. But if the namespace is Argo CD namespace, it says it's okay.
So
Whatever you put in the project.
let me think for a second. I'm not actually sure what the intended design was, and this is maybe something we need to get Jan for. I think that Argo CD was always sort of meant to be an allowed by default namespace. In other words, if you specify in your app project, I only want to consume applications which are made in the team A namespace, the implicit rule is if your application is in the team A namespace or in the Argo CD controller namespace, it's allowed. I'm not sure that the documentation was ever that explicit about it, and maybe that's not the desired design, but I think that we need Jan to answer that question.
Okay.
But what you're saying kind of makes sense to me. So there are two allowed by default rules. One is you don't have to explicitly enable the Argo CD namespace as an allowed namespace on the API server and controller. It's allowed implicitly. That makes sense to me because, you know, it would be kind of silly to exclude it. I do think it would potentially make more sense to exclude the creation of applications in the Argo CD namespace when they're not explicitly allowed listed on the app project. So basically the rule you're describing in the PR you're creating, that behavior makes sense to me. I agree it would be a breaking change, and I do want to validate with Jan that we think that's a reasonable design.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And there was, I know we're taking a lot of time on this, but with security related stuff, it's good to tackle. And Ryan's question, should it be in 3.0 since it's breaking change? I'd say maybe if we're going to do 3.0 anyway, but like maybe this behavior is just undesired behavior from the start and it's a broken security control. If that's the case, we should just make the change and be noisy about it. But again, I think we should validate with Jan. Last question on this though, you mentioned a final validation that is failing related to the cluster secret.
Yeah.
Can you describe again what that is?
In in the cluster secret, you can put a list of namespaces there. And so I've put in my cluster secret for the in cluster cluster. So the Argo CD cluster, I've put only the remote namespace, so not the Argo CD namespace. And that doesn't prevent to synchronize anything in the Argo CD namespace as well.
Interesting. Okay, so for folks who may not know this particular mechanism, in the cluster secret, there's a field called namespaces. You can set a comma delimited list of namespaces which Argo CD manages for that cluster. And for the in cluster secret, basically what you'd be saying is, I don't want Argo CD managing any namespaces besides the ones in the list I have here. So I think of that restriction as relating specifically to GitOps based management. I don't know whether I think it makes sense to make it apply to everything. In other words, there are a bunch of things you can do in the Argo CD API server that interact with resources that are in the Argo CD namespace. For example, create repositories, create clusters, change settings, all that stuff. If we exclude the Argo CD namespace from the in-cluster secret, I'm not sure that it necessarily follows in my mind that we want to block all of that API server activity in that namespace.
If I remember correctly, Michael, the namespace list in the cluster configuration is mainly to populate the cluster cache. So basically, we're just configuring the cluster cache to just bring up resources from those namespaces in the list.
Yes, and it can also functionally serve as a security mechanism, because if you're not populating that cluster cache for some out of bounds namespace, the user will be unable to do GitOps deployments to that out of bounds namespace. And by extension, unable to do all the UI actions that are associated with that resource tree. But to me, it doesn't necessarily follow that the sort of special API interactions like creating an application should be restricted by that in cluster secret namespace list. I would want a really solid explanation of why that's an absolutely necessary restriction.
Honestly, I think it sounds like there are a lot of implicit assumptions that like operations on Argo CD namespace are permitted and Argo CD is like implicitly allow listed. So we may not even fully know like what's gonna break if we like deny it in some places. So I think a better workaround might be to just like, if you want some like a namespace where you don't want people deploy, just create a separate namespace, something like critical or whatnot. I don't know, critical is probably a bad name, but yeah, that's the idea. You create separate namespace, you configure permissions for that, and like, yeah, you only deploy several applications, which you, and also allow it only to several people whom you like want to allow. And yeah.
Yeah, for me, the critical one is Argo CD one. It's because we have no secrets there that I don't want the user to look at, things like that. So it's the issue is because it's
you can configure just like not allow viewing secrets from the UI, or like I think you can. There should be some way to configure permissions to just like limit user access to specific resources.
So I guess to put the same thing a different way, why are RBAC and app project restrictions insufficient to achieve that limitation?
Yeah, I think it should be fine with the airbag. Yeah, to be honest, yeah, it's a good idea.
Okay,
So
cool.
I will try
Yeah,
that.
that covers it. I don't think we need the extra layer of protection. Good to consider, but I don't think we need it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Guillaume. I see you have another topic.
Yeah, this one is a long-lasting issue. I didn't create the issue itself. Just open the pull request to propose a fix. So it's when there is the OIDC secret that is changing. The API server is supposed to refresh the OIDC configuration so that the next call to the API server is using it. There is a whole bunch of code that is doing that. But in fact, it's not working. So when you do the next call to the API server is using the previous configuration, even if it says it has restarted with a new configuration and everything. So I did a bit of investigation around that, and it seems it's not working like it should, because everything is not restarted correctly in the API server. So if you go down, I've put a way to reproduce the issue. Yeah, until the end. Yeah, I've put the logs as well to understand what's going on. And yeah, just to give you a short version, it's because not everything is restarted correctly in the API server. So what I'm proposing in the pull request is to restart it, let's say, more correctly. So I'm restarting a bunch of other things. So really restarting all the process of the API server, but it's a part of the code that is not covered by any test. And I'm not really comfortable with it, so I would gladly get some advice about what the change I've proposed in the pull request, if you think it's valid or not. I validated that it's fixing the issue, but yeah, if there is a better way to do it.
Restarting the entire API server on a config map change worries me, unless we happen to know that it won't cause dropped connections or any downtime. To me, it's intuitive that when you restart the API server, like via deployment rolling restart, that you might have a traffic blip, especially since we don't have really good graceful shutdown logic. It's less intuitive that a config map change might result in downtime.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
I think
at the end,
I think
it's
there
not
are two
really.
problems here, Michael. The restart of the API server is already there. There's already some piece of functionality that gets automatically reloaded in Argo's API server when something changes in the config map. This is an existing feature. I dealt with that in the past a little bit. I'm not sure about this specific one, why this is not being reflected when I think it should. And the other problem is the fact that we don't have graceful shutdown for the API server implemented correctly, which would cause a few seconds of downtime whenever that happens. So I guess we're talking about two different problems here.
I have a question. Can we just like have a reload only of the logic necessary? For example, have some kind of cache for like, I don't know, 10, 15 seconds, and then like have APIs which just like read the secret based on that. And yeah, so it's gonna like, so cache would be like 10, 15 seconds is enough to like not read Kubernetes too frequently, but also it's like quick enough so that if you update it refreshes rather like fast.
I think it is possible. It's just how the code is implemented right now is by restarting based on changes from the config map. So yeah, well, we can always refactor the code, but I think it's it's a little bit involved type of change.
See, but honestly, the several seconds downtime for like something like API server doesn't sound that bad. So it's like UI doesn't load for a second or something. It's annoying, but actually I don't know. I'm not like UX expert, so maybe it's
It's
bad.
not
And-
UX. Some processes might rely on, the Argo CD CLI, and the Argo CD CLI is communicating with the API server. So having that small, time window when the API server is not up and running might cause some real issues. And we faced something similar internally in the past, and there is an open PR for addressing the graceful shutdown issue. But yeah, maybe we should take another look at the PR.
Yeah, I think if today our way of reloading config is to restart the entire server, potentially with downtime, either we need to confirm that there is no downtime, in which case, cool, we do it, or we confirm that there is downtime, in which case, I don't think that we should expand the bleeding. I think that we should figure out how to just hot reload the necessary stuff.
Yeah, there's already a whole, functions and code implemented to restart the API server based on changes coming from the config map. So if you want to refactor that, then it's going to be a much bigger change. My suggestion is to understand this issue, address the problem, and parallel to that, fix the downtime in the API server whenever that restarts.
I can take on refactoring. It may take some time, and like I would be glad if somebody can like scope this like with like create a issue with like some links to the code, how it's done today. Because I had some experience with doing this kind of hot reloading logic in Go for some configs, so I think I can tackle this just in a way proposed. If like if people agree that like this like cache for like 15 seconds is like good.
Yeah, my personal opinion, there are other places in the code that if you have the time to spend, I would prefer that you dedicate on that. I think this specifically one.
Yeah, please let me know. Yeah, I have some like time for like volunteering specifically for like just improving things. So yeah. Let me
Okay,
know.
I can take a look at this, Guillaume. I can work with you on that. I'm familiar with this part of the code. I can, yeah, it's strange that this is implemented in the command. Argos. Yeah, that's right. Okay, I'll pick this up and we can work together. So ping me on CNCF Slack. Are you there, Guillaume?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, you can ping me on there, and we can continue reviewing this.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Cool. So we are almost on time. We have one more minute, and the next one is from Andre. Customize sync option. Do you think you can wrap this up in 1 minute? Andre?
Yes. I can present, maybe we don't have time to discuss, but I want to like throw it to maybe people can like follow up later. So the idea is like current sync with prune is, or sorry, with replace is like pretty crude. If you check mark replace, it just replaces everything, even if it doesn't need replace. But there are cases when you actually need replace, like for example, recreate object with like immutable fields being updated. Also, sometimes it may be a sign that maybe your update is not intended. So it would be great to have some configuration options. So essentially, my proposal is to like for replace instead of like true or false, we specify like always same as true, never or same as false, confirm it stays the same, or like if requested, that's like if checkbox is clicked, or like for example, if immutable fields updated, so it like maybe try to like do apply regularly, and if immutable fields updated, then it like tries to reapply with like replace. And then the idea is that you can have like some configuration option on the controller by default, like how you do your replace. So default would be like if requested, so same as today. But like for some like safety issues, for example, if like admins wanna like limit people ability to do sync with replace, they can just like set it to never. Or if they still wanna like occasionally do it, they can set it like to something like if requested and immutable fields updated or something like that. So yeah, there would be like several options. Essentially, it involves changes into like how we treat like field value for replace and like prune and maybe force. Um, and it would be fully backwards compatible. And maybe in like version 3 we can like deprecate old values, but it's not critical. But I think like we can then also have resource annotations to say that hey, for this specific resource, I wanna like always sync with replace if immutable fields updated, even if like global config says like never, for example, or something like that. But yeah, we can decide like in details. But yeah, just wanted to like show this proposal because it seems like the arbag change, for example, to check for delete permissions is not like a good way to go to solve the issues replace. And like seems like, so from the people I talk to, like in my company and like in community, it seems like that like it's not a like security issue, it's like more like a safety issue. So again, arbag maybe not the best. So yeah. I know we're out of time, so yeah, please like follow up on this, comment on this. I can like implement this. It shouldn't be like too difficult. It shouldn't be like a breaking change. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, thanks for writing this up. I think it requires some attention here from the maintainers to decide if we want to go with that direction or not. So yeah,
Okay.
let's continue this discussion next week.
So, sounds good. And also one quick note, I reviewed a bunch of PRs and like marked them ready for review. So I don't have approvers yet, but like you can like filter by ready for review and just it means that it passes some like quality bar, or sometimes occasionally I would be like not approve it because I'm not like feel qualified, but still it looks like reasonable for people who may be more familiar with the code, so I still would tag it. So yeah, please like take a look. Let's make sure that like we review as much as possible. Yeah, thanks.
Cool. Thank you, Andre. All right, I think yeah, we're on time. Thanks for everyone for joining, and see you again next week. Thanks, everybody. Oh, sorry, I think next week is it's holiday in US. Within the meeting is probably, yeah, no meeting Thanksgiving. This is next week, so December 5th is the next meeting we're gonna have. Okay, thanks, everybody.
All right, thanks. Bye.
Thank you, bye.